coming down. I never liked it on the ground. I'm not coming down. I wanna go higher, higher, higher than this.
Hey badasses, this is Rebecca Fleetwood Hession, host of the Badass Women's Council podcast, and I'm glad you're here. Before we launch into today's episode, I want to give a special shout out to my son Cameron. It is actually his original music, a song called Clouds that you hear as our podcast music. And also this year for Christmas, he took his hard-earned money and purchased a set of new podcast headphones for me. And it was just amazing opening that gift and seeing his excitement to be supporting my dream and the fact that he acknowledged that I deserved these headphones because I had always been such a supporter of him and his music that he wanted to pay it back. So I love that. And he also made a comment that he wanted to buy headphones that looked cool because oftentimes I will take a quick snapshot from the podcast closet, also my master bedroom closet, and he wanted my headphones to look cute for my pictures. So you gotta love that. So thanks, Cameron. You're awesome. On today's episode, speaking of kids, we have Lindsey Hein. And I say that because Lindsey has 4 boys under the age of 6. And none of them are twins or triplets, all one at a time. So let's just have a moment of, wow, how badass is that? Lindsey is an inspiration to me when it comes to podcasting because her podcast is called I'll Have Another. And today, Lindsey talks about the jump to podcasting. And it would have been easy for her to say, I don't have time for that. I'm busy. I'm raising these boys. When I get caught up, I'll start a podcast. Because isn't that really the thing that we all say? We have that burning desire to do something, create something, and we think, when I get caught up, I'll go do that. And the truth of the matter is, you're not getting caught up, ever. I was caught up once. It was 1987. I was moving. I didn't have a job at the time, so I had about 8 hours to drive across country. I was moving from Florida back to Indiana. So for that road trip, I was caught up. Haven't been caught up since. It just doesn't happen. And what is amazing and inspiring about Lindsey's story is she did not let all of the busyness of her life get in the way from creating something that she was passionate about. So Lindsey will share some of that inspiration with you. If you are a runner, you will love Lindsey's podcast. She's a running coach and interviews runners from Olympic all the way down to the everyday runner. And also, if you're not a runner, what's so amazing about Lindsey is her authenticity. She is just absolutely real. And she doesn't get hung up on another one of those little lies that we tell ourselves that things have to be perfect before we launch them into the world. And she just does not buy into that at all. And I love following her on Instagram and seeing the authenticity in her stories and just the way she's moving through life, sharing it all. So here we go. Lindsey Hein from I'll Have Another. Hey, Lindsey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me here.
You bet. I'm glad you could be here because your life's pretty full. Getting time on your calendar feels special to me.
Oh, I was excited we could make it work.
So let's just give people a peek into the craziness of your life. One of my favorite things to do if I'm feeling stressed out is look at your Instagram story because then I realize, oh, my life is easy compared to this girl. So tell us about your life and the craziness of it.
Well, she says that because I have 4 kids ages 6 and under. So it's pretty wild at our house. It's pretty loud and energetic all the time. And they're all boys as well. So I don't know. I've never had a little girl, but from what I've been told, the energy is pretty high with 4 little boys. It comes
through loud and clear on your Instagram story, the energy in your house.
Yeah.
And what I love most about it is you're so
chill about it. And I know that's not always the case. Like, let's, you know, we're all about being real
Sure.
here. I know there are times that you probably cry in your closet and scream profanities. I hope you do. That'll make me feel really good about you if you do that once in a while.
Well, I'll say this. It is very true that when my kids make messes and stuff, I am very quick to like let it go because I'm like, whatever, I can't control this. I get most angry and upset with them when they're disrespectful to me and rude. And, you know, like, I'm just going to be completely honest, like they hit me, things like that, that kids do that they shouldn't do. That's what gets me really, really angry. And I get angry when that stuff happens because I'm like, why are you doing this? Why is this happening?
Because you're raising good human beings.
I'm trying to.
Oh, please do more of that. So you can have as many as you want because if you raise good humans, that helps us all.
Okay, I'm done though.
Oh, well, we'll see. So anytime somebody says I'm done, I always feel like they get an announcement like a year later.
Well, that was with the third for sure.
But one of them, I remember Russ was sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor, like covered in flour.
Oh yeah, they got the flour, and then the thing is that the whole bag of flour was dumped out all over the kitchen, and I was just kind of like, you know what? Here's the thing: the damage is done. And they're having so much fun in this flour and not bothering me.
It was hysterical.
So I literally like got on my computer and worked while they swam in flour in the kitchen. Because I was like, well, I could get a couple things done. I'm going to have to clean it up either way.
They're not hurting each other.
So that, you know, when I put up an Instagram story like that, that really is true. Like I really am pretty just kind of like, well, whatever, that happened. I mean, they're animals for sure, but
it makes me happy. I like it.
Yeah.
So that's a great segue to what I want us to talk about, which is in the midst of all that, because your oldest is 6, you've been able to take a passion and a career and kind of realize some of your dreams with that in the midst of all that crazy. And I think that's a story that really needs to be told because when I'm out talking with people, coaching with people, they'll tell me about a dream they have, and then they'll say, but it's just really not a good time. Mm-hmm. And I always like to talk about that lie we tell ourselves, which is when I get caught up, I'm gonna. And whatever you fill in that I'm gonna list with is usually the thing you're most passionate about or the most important thing or the thing that would serve you best. And the reality is we're never getting caught up in our whole lives. Like it's not even possible. And so if you wait to do the things that you're most passionate about or that are most important until you get caught up, you're screwed. And so you didn't live that lie. You just said, this is probably going to be hard and it might suck some days, but I'm going to do it anyway. So tell us that story.
Yeah. And I totally agree with everything you just said because the story is that I launched this podcast, which a lot of people have podcasts, but my podcast really is like, it's my bread and butter. Like it is the main job that I have.
Yeah. It's not a hobby. It's not a sort of kind of like it is your career.
It is my career. And I, through the podcast, I also do speaking engagements and things like that. But I wanted to start this show. And actually right around the time I made the decision, I put the blog post out that said, I'm going to launch a podcast.
Accountability alert.
Yes, exactly. And people started commenting and I was like, well, shoot, like people think I'm going to do it. Now I have to, which is a good thing, right? It's a good thing I wrote that blog post. But anyway, I wrote the post and then like 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant with my third. In that first trimester.
Say that slower. With your third.
Yes, with my third. And my second was, he was only 1. He had just turned 1 at the time. So they're pretty close in age. And it's those first 2 months where you're just like, I don't want to do anything but lay on the couch.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But I had given myself this timeline. I said, I'm going to launch at this date. And so it kind of gave me the perseverance to say, I have to push through. And I am not the type of person to stay up till midnight working. That is not my nature. I know some people do that, but I'm a early to bed kind of girl. And there were just like a few weeks there that I was like up until midnight trying to learn how to edit and do things. Like I didn't know what I was doing.
I won't even try. I just hire it out.
You hired. Well, I was too cheap to
Hello,
do
Brassy
that.
Broad podcast consultant.
I love
friend.
her.
Love her.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even
recommend her.
I wouldn't even learn.
And you can tell when you go back to my audio in the first 50 episodes, it's really not very good, but there was a learning curve there. So anyway, I think there's a time and a place to say, maybe I don't want to hustle hard for something. But for me, the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about it told me that I needed to go ahead and do it because otherwise I was going to lay in bed at night. I was going to go for runs and I would be thinking about what if. So I launched my show and I did a lot of it. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and I still am a lot of the time. Now I have childcare 2 days a week. But at the time, I would utilize the Y childcare. I would always record my episodes at night once my husband got home from work, or just like all this juggling, which in the long run wasn't sustainable. And truly in the long run right now with what I'm doing, it's not sustainable. Like I'm going to have to get more childcare, but it's baby steps, right? Like little bits at a time. I added 1 full day of childcare, then I added 2. So I think that you kind of have to cater what you want to do to what your life's circumstances are at the moment.
Yeah. And 2 things that you said that are really important I want to highlight. One is you couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And if you've got that thing in your head and your heart and your gut that just won't quit, those are hardwired in. Those are, God does that for a reason. Like you're supposed to pay attention to those. And so because that happened, you didn't wait until it was perfect, because I've been guilty of knowing there's something I should be doing and then just spinning for way too long because I thought, I don't know how, it's not time. But you just said, you know what? Ready, go. It's going to be messy. My quality might not be great, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think that one of God's greatest gifts he's given me is to not be a perfectionist.
Oh, it's so true.
Though sometimes people probably wish I was a little bit more of one, including my husband. But I'm not a perfectionist. I can't live that way. It's just not my nature. Like you will actually oftentimes see spelling errors and grammatical errors in my show notes of my podcast. And that's just kind of like, I choose to focus my energy on certain things, and certain things I say, hey, I'm hanging it up here, and it's just the way I operate.
I love that. Having worked in corporate America for centuries, it feels like maybe it's not been centuries, but
she's not that old.
Maybe. What I now want to represent is it's okay to make mistakes. I had a girl I was supposed to meet with that I met in a networking thing, and she forgot to put the appointment on her calendar. And I was on my way. I wasn't sure what door or entrance to go in. And I never got a hold of her. And I was just like, whatever, there's an hour of my time. I get back. I went to a coffee shop. I worked. It was no big deal. I wasn't mad about it. She messaged me that afternoon beside herself, like just with this fear. And I said, listen, with me, I always want to represent that people make mistakes, and I would much rather us represent the reality of humanity and just give each other some forgiveness and say, girl, I get it. If anything, now it gives me permission when I make a mistake to be like, it's fine. It's fine. I love that.
Well, and maybe she didn't know you very well, but to me, I'm like, I would never blow you off or anything, but like you are a very forgiving, understanding person, and I really appreciate that. Like today when I texted you, I knew that it would mean I'm taking my kids to Y childcare, dropping them off. Like it was going to add an extra layer of something in my life. And I knew that if I was feeling completely overwhelmed, I could have said, look, Rebecca, like I'm feeling crazy today. And you would have understood.
I've been like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
No
and
worries.
I mean, and that wouldn't have been to disrespect your time, which is why I'm here. Yeah. But like if something just really wasn't shaken out in my life, I could feel that from you.
And you know what's interesting is I think that people want that level of forgiveness and grace and humanity, and they're afraid to either ask for it, afraid to give. Like we've set expectations in work today that are unrealistic.
Yeah.
Completely. Another friend of mine told me that the other day she was in the middle of a program and somebody raised their hand to tell her there was a typo in the beta of this program. Like in the middle, in front of everybody.
You're like, why are you doing this right now?
Seriously.
No.
What is that even about?
And by the way, don't ever tell me I have a typo ever. Just like in general, I
just
don't
let
need to
it
know.
go.
Like if I spell something wrong, if there's bad grammar, like please don't tell me because I don't care.
I love that. And because the reason my podcast was a 6 to 8 months longer starting is because I was trying to figure out how to do it right. Mm-hmm. Insert air quotes right there.
I remember when you wanted to launch and I was so excited.
And then 8 months later, I finally started to do it.
That's not that long though, if you think about it. I mean, you're a go-getter.
I guess, maybe. But this whole like perfectionist thing, it's crap.
Yeah,
like we all need to stop.
You can't live that way.
Okay, keep going. So you launched the podcast.
Launched, yep. And I learned so much. I mean, if you listen back to interviews at the beginning, it is just kind of a completely different ballgame. I've listened back to some because I've had some repeat guests on and I'm like, ooh, it's not going to sound anything like that first time we talked, And because I didn't go to school for any. I mean, I went to school for nutrition. Like that's not.
Which is why there's flour all over your floor all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Like I'm white flour, by the way. It was not whole wheat flour or almond flour or whatever flour, pea flour, whatever flour you guys use these days.
But that's another great message is there are so many ways to figure things out today. You don't have to have years of education about it.
Yeah, I feel like people think, oh, this is what I went to school for, or this is my experience in the work field. But like, if that's not what you're passionate about, that doesn't mean you can't do something different.
So you launched, things weren't perfect. And now let's fast forward. So how long have you had the podcast in totality now?
2.5 years.
And in 2.5 years, you went from, oh my gosh, in your closet trying to figure out how to do a podcast. And now you've got a legit following.
Thank you.
You really do. Like it's impressive.
I think, my following, I think it's a pretty robust number of people, but more than that, because it's certainly not like massive, but it's pretty big. But they're engaged and like talking to me. And I feel like I try to at least get to know my listeners. I have a Facebook group and I always...
An active one.
Yeah, I think it's pretty active. You think so?
I do. When I look...
'Cause you're in it.
And when I see the comments and I look at the interaction, it's like people are sitting in a room together having a conversation.
Thank you.
It's and you set that tone because of your authenticity and your lack of need for perfection. Like people know you're just real. And I think that shows big time. People ask real questions and real encouragement. It's cool.
I love the group because I feel like people can reach out to everybody else and not just like I don't have to be the mediator for things. And I want people to, like, if someone's fundraising for something or if someone's doing this or that or is going to an event, like I want them to feel comfortable posting. And I've never had anybody take advantage of that. So I've never set any guidelines or anything.
It's like those friends that can come into your house at any time.
Yeah.
Like even if you're not home and just like get something out of the fridge and I'll be home later.
Go get some cheese, whatever you need out of the fridge, or beer, wine, whatever.
No, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And this whole time we haven't even talked about what it's about.
Oh, my podcast.
Yes.
Okay.
So
it's a podcast. I wanted to create a show that was people having good conversations that you felt like you could be a part of them. You could learn something from them. And ultimately what I wanted was people to walk away feeling happy or inspired to do something and not sit on their butts, right? And so the niche has really become runners. And, the plan from the start was to talk to a lot of runners. And Rebecca and I had this conversation about a year ago, probably, that you really do need to have some sort of niche to make it work. And it worked out that running really was my niche. That's what I knew about.
You're a running coach.
I'm a coach. I've ran my whole, since I was like a sophomore in college. And I know a lot about the sport. I enjoy learning about the sport, and it's easy for me to talk about it. So though I have interviewed other people, for instance, I interviewed Jessica Honegger. She's the founder and CEO of Noonday Collection. We didn't talk about running once in that episode. It was kind of more of an episode where I got to know her and her business and her family. But most of my interviews do happen to be with runners, and some of them are super heavy on the running side, but a lot of times we talk about other aspects of their lives as well.
And like you said, you didn't start out saying, I'm going to start a running podcast. You just wanted a place where people could come together and be inspired and just have a happy kind of gathering. But your running history is legit as well. And that's the thing is you are humble about things, but like you've been on the cover of Running Magazine.
I won a contest though.
But still.
Yeah. I mean, that contest was like, it was a lot of people entered the contest. And I, shared my story about, I found out I was positive for the BRCA2 gene mutation and elected to have a prophylactic double mastectomy at the age of 30. And I was sharing my story of working on overcoming fear in that contest. And so anyway, I won that. And it's interesting that you brought that up because I was just on another show and we talked about it a little bit. And we talked about how when I was on the cover of the magazine, like, was that what was at the time, I didn't know what that would turn into. And I don't know that I give full credit to like launching my podcast from that, but it did give me a little bit of a following, a little bit more than I already had to kind of help propel my show. It's just interesting that I didn't launch my show until like 3 years later. So like I had no idea
Really?
that was going to be,
I didn't realize it was that long after.
Yeah. Well, it was 2014. I guess I launched my show in 2016. So it was 2 years. It seems like a long time though. 2 years.
Tell them which magazine that was.
That was Women's Running magazine. Yeah.
Which is huge.
Yeah, it was a big deal at the time. Yeah, for sure.
And that is another, I think, key message that everybody needs to hear is all of the things that you're talking about have been baby steps, right? And realizations. Like you get to this point where you are faced with this, oh my gosh, life-altering decision about your health. And as a runner, that has to feel so much more weighty is the only word I can think of right now. Even, I don't know, that just feels significant to me to be someone that is, you've gone to school for nutrition, you're a runner, it's everything. And then all of a sudden you're like faced with a health crisis.
Yeah, because you think, oh, I'm like the healthiest person in the world.
Absolutely. And so the overcoming fear of making those decisions, and you talk a lot about those baby steps of just making those decisions. I want you to talk about that again in a moment. But that piece then was also what allowed you then to overcome that fear of, I'm just going to start a podcast in my closet and I don't really even know how to do it yet, but I'll figure it out, right? So it's those pieces of our lives that when you put them together creates our story. And I think the more we, especially as women, can share our story and our struggle, the more it gives permission and the more it opens up people's dreams and opportunities to say, oh, well, I don't have to have it all figured out. Well, I don't have to, I think that's just an important thing. So talk about that whole overcoming fear in that health crisis that has kind of propelled you forward.
Well, so I always say now, especially like it's still something I am working on every day. And until the day I die, I don't think that I'll have it all figured out. Fear is kind of, do you ever pay attention to the Enneagram stuff?
I'm a 7.
Okay. I think I'm a 7 too with a 6 wing. And I don't know if anybody listening has paid attention to it. I haven't done like the intense studies or anything, but I have that fear, which is like the 6, like worst case scenario thing. So anytime a health issue comes up, I'm like automatically giving myself the worst diagnosis. I'm that person.
Don't Google it then.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing.
Right. I'm that person. I'm really trying to move away from being that person, because that's the other thing is like are we going? Oh, you're good. You can claim that you're that person, and then you're going to think you're that person for the rest of your life.
The story you tell yourself is the most important one.
Right. So like I'm sitting here saying like I'm working on moving away from that every day. But if I sit here and claim that I am a fearful person, I will always be fearful, well, then I probably will always be fearful.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean I don't slip up and I don't have things that creep in sometimes, but I have to actively pursue that not being my story.
And how great that you have that awareness to know that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's everything about this podcast has been reflection and connection. And that's that reflection piece, is that self-awareness allows you to move forward.
Yeah.
Because you got to know your starting point. And you say, if I feed those fears, I'm dead in the water. So I've got to figure this thing out.
Yeah. So with the decision to make to have the prophylactic double mastectomy, I found out I was positive for the mutation, and it was one of those things that I avoided doing for a really long time. I avoided getting the blood test because I was scared of what the answer would be.
There we go. Fear.
Right? Fear.
6. Yeah.
And so once I found out, though, it was kind of like, well, now I can make decisions, and now I can educate myself and be proactive about this. And so it's kind of similar in a less scary way with something like launching my podcast, because it's like, well, I didn't know how to do any of the things I wanted to do, but I would educate myself. So it's like I would go out for these long runs and I would come back and I would say, okay, you're going to Google one YouTube video and figure that one piece out today. And that'll be your goal for the day. Instead of, because I think that we get scared because we think we have to figure it all out at once, and you just can't do that.
That was me.
Yeah, you
that
can't
was
do
me.
that. It's impossible.
And I was glad to have Jen Eads, who is my podcast consultant. I love saying that. I have a podcast consultant.
I need a podcast consultant myself.
It's the Brassy Broad. She's fabulous. But I would message her and I would ask her these questions. And I really wanted there to be right and wrong answers. Because that just seemed like the way it was supposed to be. And she finally got to the point she'd just laugh at me. And she would say, you know what my answer is going to be? What do you want it to be, Rebecca? It depends. Like, you can do it this way or you can do it that way. And I was like, oh, it's my podcast. I can do whatever I want. Oh, yeah.
Isn't that the cool thing? Even if you get critics saying you shouldn't do it this way or that way, like, it's your podcast.
It's
you
my
own
podcast.
the show.
Yeah. That was scary and then finally freeing. But it probably took 7 or 8 exchanges with her before I finally got that.
Right.
And you just said, you know what? I'm just going to one thing at a time.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I brought up the critic thing, and like you do get constructive feedback, and you can use that to change things, or you can say, screw that. Like, this is how I want to do things. But I've feel like I've grown a lot in my show from listening to constructive feedback from listeners.
In making adjustments that made it better for the listeners, not just saying, hey, this is the way I do it.
In my interview style and stuff, like when I research the interviews and things like that, and sometimes it's hard to hear things that you're like, oh, maybe I wasn't doing such a good job at that. But then if you really think it through, you're like, they have a point.
Right.
They maybe could have said it nicer, but they had a point.
Faceless communication, anything you get online, it's so hard.
And it's hard to not like let it tear you down as well.
Yeah.
But if you can use it to your advantage, or if it's not helpful, like bye.
I read through all the comments on my TEDx talk once.
Ooh.
And
were most of them good, I'm sure.
90% of them are great.
3 bad ones, it's hard to read.
Oh my gosh. And I just said, you know what? Okay, that was good. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you've progressed and you've started to really get, like I said, this amazing following with the podcast, what are some other things that you would say to listeners that have that, I can't stop thinking about this thing. It feels like a big thing. Great tips so far. It doesn't have to be perfect, just baby steps. Learn as you go. You don't have to be professionally trained in something. There's a million resources out there that you can find to help you do something that you want to do. But what else can you think of that comes to mind that you say, here's something I think is important about this journey?
Let's see here. I think take the first steps, write out 5 things that you want to do and whatever the topic is that you're talking about. So we keep using podcasts as an example, but
could be
it's run a marathon or whatever it is. Write out your 5 reasons why you want to do it, and then give yourself 5 reasons why you're going to make that happen and how you're going to make that happen. And
I put in little rewards for myself.
Yeah.
Like if I get these things done, and the rewards might be something like, I'm going to eat cake for breakfast. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a big expensive reward, but it's a way that I keep myself motivated, because when you're doing things on your own, you got to motivate yourself too.
Well, and the holding yourself accountable piece too. Like I truly think that writing that blog post saying I was gonna start a podcast, it was out there. So I was like, well, people think I'm going to, now I really want to, so and not to say that it's do or die. And if your vision changes or your dream changes, you still have to go through with it. But I think that putting yourself out there to people holds you accountable, and give yourself dates. Like by March, I want to be doing this. By June, I hope my show is here. And I find that if I give myself, in regards to like my podcast, like if I give myself a listener number, or I give myself a goal with sponsorships or things like that, if I have it written down, I'm going to be way more likely to go after it than just saying, well, I hope in July I'm, doing this.
I tell all of my clients that I coach to have a whiteboard or some sort of visual representation of your goals that are tangible, just like that, from this number of listeners to this number of listeners by this date, that you have to walk by, or it's in your office or your kitchen or somewhere, so you have to look at it because that's your accountability.
Can you tell me where in my house I should put this? Because I'm really struggling with this.
Well, I'm thinking the only place that's safe at your house might be the ceiling of your bedroom or above the couch, because everything else I've seen, you got a climber as one of your kids. Like, I'm not I don't know, I may have to come over and
I really want you
to,
because I actually just bought this huge calendar like of the year, and I want to hang it. It's like it sticks to the wall, and I don't know where to put it because I don't have an office at home, and I office out of the Hatch, which is a co-working space. I don't have an office here. I use rooms. But I really want this in a good place in my house. But the problem is you don't want it in your bedroom.
No, you really don't.
You don't. But that's like the only place I can think of. I
kind of like things to be sort of pretty.
Yeah.
I got a really cool easel, like an antique-y kind of one, and I just put a whiteboard on that in my kitchen.
Really?
when we had shared goals with the kids. And that way everybody had access to it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And I think even as a business goal, it's important that your family sees your progress.
Yeah.
Because just to know that you're working hard and you've got these other things going on, I think it's important to show your kids and your husband, look at the progress that I've made. Or, hey, I'm really struggling, which is going to mean that I'm going to need you to help out on this particular week because I'm behind on my goal, because yours is a business.
Yeah,
And it needs
is.
to be treated like a business.
Yeah. And my husband has like definitely come to realize that for sure. And he is very helpful. Like I am my husband works in corporate America. So he's like an 8 to 5 guy, but he is definitely not what he would say an office hero. Like he is totally good with being like, I can work from home today. I'm going to have some kid interruptions, but I can get done what I need to get done to help with your schedule. I mean, there are definitely certain weeks where he's busier and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Right.
But when it's really not, like if I were to score a really big interview and I couldn't figure out the childcare, he would make it work for me.
Well, I know recently I just saw on your story that he took a day to work from home to do that for you, so you could prep. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's the same way when you've got two people in corporate America as a couple, because the same thing happens. You make trades,
You do.
right? You just
Yeah,
say,
like
look,
with the kids and
I got a
stuff.
huge presentation next week. I've got this, and you just have to have that communication. So I don't mind businessy stuff being in the common area of a house, because I think it just tells the real story. This is the way it is.
And I do realize too that, his job can be flexible in that way. I mean, he's flexible in that way because he makes those decisions, but like, he's not a doctor. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have a job where he's like, I have an appointment. I have to do surgery. I'm sorry, I cannot come home for your podcast interview. But like,
Although I've sat in a waiting room for so long, I wonder if people
maybe they are doing that. My wife had a podcast. I'm sorry.
I'm going to be late.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait a little
Sit
bit.
in your
on
paper
that.
gown for a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's funny.
So the whole family support is we could do a whole nother podcast on that.
for
That's
sure.
huge.
That's huge. I would not and that's been a struggle, honestly. Like it's been hard at times to figure this thing out because I work for myself, I work by myself, and finding support can be difficult. And I find myself wanting to just like spew everything to him because who else am I talking?
And that's the second part of this. The Badass Women's Council is connection. There's reflection and connection. And so I just had this conversation the other day talking to someone about our key relationships as women in business, is that we need that support system that's outside of our significant others, because we can't put all of the accountability and responsibility to feed our souls in that way.
So true.
With the business as much as it is at home. Like it's just unfair for one person to carry all that weight.
Yep. And they don't frankly want to.
Yeah. So you've got great relationships all over town. We're in your co-working space right now where I know you've got a lot of people here that at the Hatch that you interact with. What does your network of connection look like to support you?
Well, I have one group of girlfriends in particular. We have a group text, and actually it was one of the girls when you and I walked into the Hatch that I introduced you to. We're very supportive of each other with our family life and like business goals. And so we bounce ideas off each other all the time. Actually, one of my friends, she's a stay-at-home mom, and her 2 younger kids were at preschool for the day, and she was like out running errands. And I said, hey, I am working on this pitch for something at the beginning of the year next year. She gets into the business stuff. I said, would you mind coming over and like walking through it with me? And she was like all over it. And
I love that.
Out of the kindness of her heart too. Like she has a busy woman, but she kind of enjoys that. And so I'd say that group of friends is huge for me. And then I'm actually one of the girls, I did a live podcast in November. I did a couple actually, and one was in New Hampshire. And one of the girls, her name's Sarah Canny, she basically put the whole show on, just invited me out to do it. And I'm going to be working with her and hopefully a couple other girls to do some sort of mastermind in the realm of the running entrepreneurship world.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's a weird niche, but like she has like a running retreat, and I have a running podcast. So just like working together to figure out how we can expand our businesses.
I love that. And it is a very active niche as well, because runners,
it is, for
you've
sure.
got to be committed to be a runner.
Yeah.
And so they like information about running. I think it's a great.
Yeah. And it'll be good because being in another mastermind, I mean, being in a business mastermind is a great idea, but I think that being in a specific group that is talking about the part of your business that you're actually like the running community is where my business thrives.
Absolutely. And a mastermind, for those of you maybe who haven't experienced it, is a group of people that have a common need or goal or expectation, and they come together on a usually a monthly basis.
Well, yeah, and
share.
There are like huge masterminds that you have to pay like thousands of dollars to be a part of because you're basically paying this bigwig person to facilitate it, which maybe eventually I'll do something like that and really grow from that. But this is going to be more of like, we're all kind of in this together. We're more like
the
peers.
Badass Women's Council, our group of 7 that comes together around.
Essentially that is a mastermind.
Yep.
And the girl that's gonna kind of, she asked me if I wanted to be part of it. She's probably gonna be a leader in the group. Like, you figure out who's the leader, whose strengths are here, whose strengths are there.
Yeah. And if you go back in the podcasts from us, Jason Barnaby has an inventory around who needs to be in your tribe, because a mastermind really is building.
I haven't listened to this yet.
So good. It is really building who is that tribe, and different people play different roles. There's the leader, there's the devil's advocate that helps you think through stuff. There's the dreamer, there's the connector. He's got a entire inventory of descriptions around what kind of people do you need in.
Who are you in my life? Because I feel like you're a person in my tribe.
I'm usually a connector and someone that inspires about the dreams is my primary thing. But as a consultant, as a business consultant, I can play the realm of devil's advocate if we need to think through the business implications and we need to think through the money-making model. Like, I can go there, but my favorite thing to do is connect people and just help them dream bigger than they've even allowed themselves to dream.
And I have to tell everybody listening what you did for me.
Oh, what'd I do?
I had this talk. Yeah. Linking Indie Women asked me to speak at their event.
Oh, yeah.
And I was pretty, I'd done some public speaking, but this was like a pretty big engagement for me. There was probably going to be like 70 people there. And it was, a 40-minute talk,
that's a long time for if you haven't been doing it a while.
Yeah. It's a long time to put pieces of your story together and really engage the audience. And I mean, Rebecca took like 2 different afternoons and sat down with me and helped me work through it and just gave me her time in that way. So
it's fun.
I still appreciate that.
Oh, good. It was fun.
It was a big deal. And it was really helpful in me learning how to craft future talks as well. I mean,
good.
You should really teach classes on that, by the way.
Oh, probably should.
Another arm of your business.
I will add that.
Add that to the list.
Add that to the list. But that's another great message for today is we all have talents that we forget we have because we've been doing them for so long that somebody else probably could use your help with.
Yeah.
And so to reach out to people and offer that support has been something that I've tried to make more of a habit, and I love doing it.
Yeah. I mean, you just gave me your time, and that was the nicest thing ever.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end on how wonderful that you're talking about me. How's that? But I do want to summarize. I mean, we've talked about some amazing things about overcoming fear, that there's no need to think about perfection. That's going to stall you out more than anything if you're trying to launch something that you're excited about. And just to learn and grow as you go. And that's where you get this connection to your story that now I think is so compelling for people, that you just authentically are able to go out and tell that story, and it shows up in your community in a big way.
Thank you.
Well, I'll put all kinds of great details in the show notes about how to find you and everything else that you're about, but I'm thrilled that we could get together today.
Yeah, I want to do this more. Thank you so much.
Let's do. All right.
And I'm not coming down.
I told you, she's the real deal. We love Lindsey. I hope you will go to her Instagram, her Facebook group, and subscribe to her podcast. I will have all of those links for you in the show notes. And again, her podcast is called I'll Have Another. I'm super jelly because Lindsey has like 1,500 reviews of her podcast on iTunes. And, I'm fairly new, but I've got 2 and I'm a little jelly. So if you would like to go and leave a review for the Badass Women's Council podcast, that would be a badass move. As always, we have reflection questions for you today as a result of this episode. And here they go. One is, what are you aching to try or to create or to go do? And who can you share it with? Because as Lindsey shared with us, that was the catalyst. Once she said she was going to do it, then she felt like she needed to go do it. So share some of those dreams that you have with someone and let that be the inspiration to get you started. Okay, thanks so much for being here. If you need a keynote speaker, or maybe it's time to hire a coach or someone to facilitate something for your team, I am your girl. Give me a shout. Thanks so much.
I'm not coming down.